Hello, is it working? Let me have a look on my screen to see if I'm coming up. Where are you? Beautiful, beautiful. It seems like I'm showing up. Thank you so much for everyone who was waiting for me. I have no idea what was going on, but my phone was saying that I have no internet connection even when I put it onto my satellite internet. So I guess it was the universe's way of saying it wasn't the right time for me to be jumping on. So now is the right time. Thank you for waiting for me. I'm going to give a few minutes to just let people pop on. I have tagged as many people as I could, though in the post I have seen that it's only tagged a couple of people and untagged some people. So fingers crossed everyone gets this. Hi Jody, I can see your comments. So lovely to have you with me again. It's always nice to see you. So what I will do, because that was a little bit of a stressful, I guess, moment trying to get on live to make sure I can deliver this to you. So what I might do is just take a moment, if we can, just to take a couple of deep breaths and really settle into having some nicer vibrations, some nicer energy. So if you just take a moment with me and take a few deep breaths, that would be really, really good. And then we can get into the content for creating inclusion in your business workshop 3-day series, which I'm really excited about. I hope that I can fit everything into day one. I'm not sure I will, but fingers crossed for that, and everything happens exactly how it's meant to happen. So if you'll sit with me and take a few deep breaths, that would be wonderful. Awesome, I'm already receiving some downloads from my ancestors, from my intuition, and they're saying it is going to be a fantastic day, a fantastic live, and everyone who's here is meant to be here. I'm really excited. So let's get into it. There are 3 people joined now. I really hope more people jump on, but if you're just jumping on now, don't worry, you can watch the beginning if you missed it. Now, also, if you're watching live, please, I love interacting with you. So I have my computer set up so I can see your comments as they come in, as my phone is a little bit slower than my computer. And then, oh, thank you so much, Jody. If you could tag people that I've popped in the description, that would be absolutely amazing. You'd be like a lifesaver to me, so that would be wonderful. And I will start getting into the content. Please pop your questions in the comments. Hi Darlene, so lovely to have you here. And if you have any questions or any thoughts or anything that are coming up, please pop them in the comments, and every now and again I'll pop back and see if I can answer some of those questions. Hi Michelle, yes, you made it. Thank you so much for being here. You are here on perfect timing. We're just about to start. So let's begin day one. So day one, I'm going to be talking a little bit about business culture. And this is something that a lot of my clients struggle to understand. And that is mainly because most of my clients are quite highly privileged, so to speak. And defining their own culture is something that's not necessarily required because they belong to a dominant culture. And so having to actually define those individual things that make up culture can be a little bit tricky. It is certainly possible, and I'm going to walk you through doing that, but it is just a lot easier for marginalized people to define, especially culturally marginalized people, to define their culture, because they've had to I don't like using the word fight, but they've had to constantly strive to have that right to be in their culture and perform their culture and rituals. So you'll notice when I speak, a lot of the words, I might stop and pause for a while, because even though I'd work in this space a lot, the vibrations of the words matter. Words really do matter, and often I'll try and search for a better alternative to use. So rather than using fight, I use strive, which is a much better term to use, even though they kind of mean the same thing, but one is a much higher vibrational space, and one is almost like there is no power in it, but another is there is power in it because people are taking action. So I will have moments of pausing to find and search the right word, with my limited vocabulary, that is, but I will do my best. So hello to everyone who's here. Thank you so much for making it live. Please pop your stuff in the comments, whatever comes up for you, even aha moments, thoughts, anything like that. I love interacting. Hi Amanda, hi Erin, I can see you are both joined. Hi Amanda, Marty, beautiful, lovely, lovely, lovely. So the very first thing that I'm going to do in this is do an acknowledgement of country. So I would like to acknowledge the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation as the traditional and ongoing custodians of the lands of which I live and work and play and love and have my family. And I would like to pay my respects to the elders here for all the work and support they do in the community. See, this is the time where I start getting a little bit emotional. They are so deeply important to me and so special, and the role that they play here is something that I probably can't express in words, how magical and amazing and important it is to us all. I would also like to acknowledge and pay my respects to the custodians and the elders of the places on which you are in as well, because I recognise that not everyone who's participating in this workshop is in Australia. So hello to around the world people. Actually, if you are joining, can you let me know where you're coming from? It's always nice to see how we're connected by place as well. And part of inclusion is learning how we're connected in different ways, and place is one of those things where we can start to identify with other people based on place and not necessarily things like race or culture or anything like that. So pop where you're coming from in the comments. If you know the Aboriginal name, if you're in Australia, or you know the First Nations name for the place you're in, please pop that in too. Okay, so who am I? If you don't already know me, my name is Louise O'Reilly. I am a Warrwa-Noongar Aboriginal woman. That is how I identify, though my heritage also includes, I'm Scandinavian, there's a little bit of lower Middle Asian heritage there, there's also Papuan heritage there, so I'm a lovely mix. But the thing about identity is that it is whatever you decide or feel is right in your heart for you. It is not necessarily based on other things. So I identify as an Aboriginal woman, and I'm very proud and love that. And it's where I feel that I really belong and fit in the world. I am a inclusion and diversity coach, consultant, course creator, and this is something that has been a very big interest of mine since I was about 6 years old. So there are some life events that started happening around that point which made me recognize that me in my culture wasn't necessarily accepted or loved or wanted in my community, in my school, you know, dealing with racism in the community and in my family. It's a lot of different things came up, and identity became such a important part of me at a very early age, and I really observed the behaviors of others, the words they spoke, how differently body language worked, all those kinds of things. And I avoided doing this work for so long because it's so deep. it has been very painful growing up with my identity, going through periods of totally rejecting my identity and realizing that that was really soul crushing and it destroyed me. Then going through and having babies, and that was the turning point for me, because I realized I didn't love myself. I didn't love and accept my culture. I wasn't inclusive of who I was in the world, and I didn't know how I fit. It was a very sad place to be, and I realized that that is something that I didn't want for my children. So I made a decision to do some really deep inner searching and finding out who I was, and that's where I found the power to start talking about this painful topic, which the way I talk about it a lot of the time is not the painful way. Of course, we have to talk about some of the truths, but I do it in a way that I hope you feel empowered by this, and I hope that you feel like you belong in this. So I also want to say right now to everyone joining, thank you everyone who is joining, welcome. Please participate in the discussion, talk with others in the group, support each other, and if anything comes up for you as I'm talking, please post that in the comments and I will pop back every now and again to read them. So I want to say to you that I'm creating and I'm holding this safe space for you, and I have been holding this safe space for you since before I started promoting this workshop. And what I mean by that is that this is a non-judgmental area. I know there are a lot of coaches in this space here, but if people are sharing their vulnerabilities, their thoughts, their ideas, I would encourage you not to jump into your coaching mode. I know it's really difficult for coaches because you're naturally a teacher, naturally a coach, but please avoid doing that, because the coaching industry is not quite up to speed with inclusion and diversity, and our society is not up to speed with inclusion and diversity. So there may be well intentions, but there are spaces that haven't been looked at, and new paradigms will be created through doing this training. So thank you so much for doing that. Absolutely support each other, send the love, all that stuff, but please don't coach each other during this workshop. That is my job to do. Okay, so non-judgmental space, please share. And if you, I hope you feel safe to share, but if there is something that's coming up for you which you are feeling super uncomfortable about sharing publicly, please also know that you can message me privately as well. And I will, if you are talking about things that are a little bit inappropriate or maybe not okay, I will let you know, but I will let you know in a loving, warm kind of way, and I won't kind of shut you down and make you feel bad for saying or thinking what you did, because, you know, we are products of our society, and a lot of the times things that society thinks is okay isn't necessarily okay for marginalized people. Okay, so we got on to the safe space stuff. Let me just have a quick look at comments. If I can see all the comments. No, I can't see all the comments. Interesting. Okay, so we've got some people from Sydney, Tweed Heads, Bunjalung country. You've also got, oh my goodness, I don't know if I can even say that word. Yungabear country, and Combermi. I'm not fantastic at pronouncing these things. It takes me a little while, but I will always give it a go, even if I sound a little bit silly. Okay, so first off, let's talk a little bit about inclusion. If you are just new to me, and a lot of people who are joining this workshop are new to me and my work, basically what inclusion is this idea or this concept that we no longer are separating people into separate groups. They no longer belong in separate groups. Instead, we are really understanding and identifying that every single person on the whole planet belongs to the same community, and that's the human community. But in that community, we have smaller communities, and by no means does inclusion mean you can't identify with certain groups or communities of people, but what it means is that it is a space where everyone feels safe to show up exactly how they want to express themselves, or however they feel their identity calls them to identify. And they feel safe to be there. They feel like they are valued. They feel like when they speak, it matters, and they feel like they're heard. So everyone is equal in this space. So it's very, very closely linked with equality. And I may even talk a little bit about equity too, because in the lead up to equality, equity may need to take place until such a time that we are all equal. And unfortunately, that is not right now. So we've talked about inclusion. Now, inclusion in business. So I have had a few questions to say, you know, but if we have inclusion in business, are we ignoring our niches? Because we're encouraged to niche in business. And I say not at all. It's important to know what your niche is. But the thing about inclusion is that with our niches, they are niched down to actually quite large groups of people. And by not being all inclusive of that large group of people, sometimes we're actually unintentionally excluding people who are in our niche, who do belong in our niche, just because we don't have that other awareness of the way we're showing up in business, the words that we're saying, the marketing that we're doing, and the kind of media that we're using. So when we can start to look at being inclusive of all of our niche, and not in terms of saying, I work with women who are coaches, who are looking to lose weight. That's not the kind of thing that you actually need to say. When you know what your niche group is, the way you use your language, the way you use your marketing, and the way you show up will naturally attract that group of people. And that way you don't even need to say, I don't work with these certain groups of people. And certainly, so for me, for instance, my niche is actually women, or people who identify as women, or people who are comfortable working within the feminine energies. And if a male or someone who identifies as a man wants to come work with me, I'm certainly not going to turn them away. They are comfortable in working in this space with me in the way I do it. But the way that I create my messaging and my marketing, it attracts women. I never say that I only work with women. And every single person that I have worked with so far has either identified as woman or non-binary. So with that, I would also like to say that I do identify as a woman, and my pronouns are she and her. So how are you going with that? How are we traveling? Are you understanding everything so far? Do you need me to slow down? Okay, Jody has just said, one of the worries I have is that if I was to explicitly flag that I'm inclusive, what if I gain a client and be harmful? I remember a time not so long ago that I said something from the well-intended but quite harmful bucket because I didn't know any better. If I'm explicit that my business is inclusive but not a safe provider because of my blind spot, is that not problematic? It is, but who in the world do you know is completely inclusive and knows all the ins and outs of inclusivity and knows all the ins and outs of all cultures and all identities? You are not going to find a single person on the planet who is that person. And this is about identifying those blind spots, then knowing what to do if you do happen to create offense or cause harm in any way. It is knowing how to really quickly amend those things and repair that relationship very quickly with the person. And then from then, listen how you could have done things better. Ask them directly and show you're deeply apologetic, that you didn't know and you want to do better, and you would love to listen from them and learn from them to make sure you never make that mistake again. This is a learning journey for everyone. Never in the history of the planet have we ever been in this space where we are being so consciously inclusive in our businesses and in our life. We are at a new level in our human evolution, really, where we're at this point. So we don't have the all-knowing stuff yet. This is the learning stuff. We are the trailblazers in this particular category. And yes, we're going to make mistakes, but I'll talk about that a little bit soon. But I hope that has helped you with that a bit. Okay. And Samantha has asked about using the term woman with the X instead. Okay, so I wasn't going to talk about this, but I will. It might make it a little bit longer, but I do think it's important to talk about this. And even in my header on this group, I have it with an X, but my position has changed on this since doing that. Okay, so woman with an X came up as a term to be inclusive of people who weren't necessarily born with female genitalia and things like that. And it was in response of a new word that came out, which was my throat chakra, which was woman, and they used a Y instead of the X. So that came out, and that was in response to transgender women coming out, or people identifying as women who weren't necessarily categorized as women in our society prior. And it come from this kind of white woman version, which meant that they were born with female sex organs. And it was to mean that they were pure women. And so in response to that, woman with an X was created to include all women, however they come to be women. The issue with women with an X is it's also exclusive, because that using that word means that woman with an O or an A or an E doesn't include all women. So I use women the way the word originally was, because if you identify as a woman, you belong in that category, and you don't need to change the word to belong in that category. You do belong in that category because you choose to, and I completely accept that. So I no longer use woman with an X, and I see a lot of people do, and I know it is with beautiful intentions of being inclusive. However, in my personal perspective, woman with an X is also an exclusive word. Okay, beautiful. Let's move on to the next thing. Let's acknowledge some of your business fears around showing up as an ally in your business, or showing up being more inclusive in your business and doing business in a little bit different way than maybe you have before. So the first one is causing offense. That's the first one I've got. So obviously that has already come up in this conversation, and getting it wrong. There is also not knowing who to listen to. There is not knowing where to get the right information from. And there's also a fear of, and I put here backlash, but then I put in there that is also a word that maybe isn't fantastic to use, because backlashings generally happen to people of color and slaves. So even just the everyday language that I have used, sometimes I pick myself up and go, okay, I don't want to use backlash anymore. Maybe fear of causing a confrontation or upset in some kind. So like I said a bit earlier, I teach from a space of love and a space of a space of high vibration, where people are powerful in what they're wanting to share, powerful in how they're wanting to show up, and really knowing and feeling within themselves that's important to them, their business, and who they are as a person. I work from a space of inspiration and not motivation. So motivation is when something happens externally and we're triggered to do something. We get really upset and we get angry about it and we get, sad and all that kind of stuff, and then goes, well, I want to do something about this. And that motivation only continues until that trigger has finished. So I'm not teaching that kind of stuff. What I'm teaching is inspiration. So inspiration comes from within, and it requires no external triggers to drive you. So that means that your fire inside you can continue burning for as long as you exist, or for as long as the problem is a problem and it's not aligned with your want for how the world should be. So a lot of you feeling that there's a lot of inequality in the world, and that people are being oppressed and people are being harmed, and there is an imbalance of power and all that kind of stuff. So they're the values that you're feeling, and you're not satisfied with how the world is, so you're wanting to do something from the inside out, and not necessarily just of course you're going to be triggered by those outside things, but that drive is there regardless if those triggers are happening, and you want to be part of making that change. So that's where I teach. Now those vibrations from inspiration are things like love and compassion and kindness and unity and community and all those beautiful things. That's your drive. Whereas motivation a lot of the time is a lot of anger and disappointment and shame and guilt. So I don't want to work with those lowest frequency spaces, because that's all it brings. When you're putting those and emitting those vibrations out, that's all you will attract back, and that's all that will go into the world. So when we're working with this same topic from those higher frequency stuff, you're going to start creating those high vibrational stuff in the world and creating what I call ripples of inclusion. Okay, let me see if I've got any more. Darlene said, exactly, I never changed the way I spelt woman. Beautiful. I'm glad you picked that up very, very early. Beautiful. I have to keep popping back to the comments because it's only allowing me to see 4 comments at a time, and I can't see any more than that. Okay, so let's talk about I will quickly go through some of those fears, because I want to have a little bit of mind shift stuff happening with some of the fears that you may be feeling in business. With any of those fears that I mentioned, if some of them are popping up for you, can you pop them in the comments so we can see just where you're sitting at, and then I can also know how I can help you a little bit better. So those fears again were causing offense, getting it wrong, not knowing who to listen to, not knowing where to get the right information, and fear of causing confrontation. Okay, so causing offense. There are a few little things that you can do with that. Apologies if I keep looking off to the side, I'm looking at my notes. So there are a couple of things that you can do to lessen this fear. But what I also want to say about fear is not a bad thing. Fear is something that I have recently had an epiphany about, that fear is there lovingly to help you. It's something that lets you know when you are doing something that either is outside of your comfort zone or isn't safe. So when fear shows up, that's a really great navigation tool for you to go, oh, why am I feeling this fear? And dive into understanding that a little bit better. Why am I fearing causing offense? What will happen from that? And what does that mean for me? What does it mean for who I am? And maybe the fear is coming up because you've never done it before. But you know what? We're business owners. We're always doing things that we've never done before. And we're always experiencing the fear and finding ways of accepting those fears and doing the thing anyway. And that is no difference for inclusion and diversity in your business as well. But it seems like there's this almost like another whole layer to it, which we can certainly help you move through. So one thing I can say is to stay in your lane, and not necessarily in your lane the way a lot of people say stay in your lane and keep and mind your own business and not talk about these things, but stay in your lane as in stay with your values. So there's no point in wanting to talk about something that doesn't align with your values, because it just means that you are putting your input in a place where your soul doesn't feel it needs to be. And so it's really, this work is about being really true to yourself and really honing down what are your core values. What are the spaces that you feel really strongly about? What are the spaces that you feel that you just cannot live with and will not put up with and not stand in this world anymore? What are those? And stick with them. And not only because that's who you are and it's part of your soul's want and desire, but because it helps you to focus and hone your energy. Because when you are talking about all the things, your energy is split so thin that you don't make an impact anywhere. Whereas if you can start really focusing your energy on things that are really, truly, deeply important to you, that's where you can start making those real impacts. And that doesn't mean that everything else in the world doesn't matter, all the other causes don't matter. What it means is that you are focused on this particular spot and other people are focused on those other particular spots. And by you taking the energy and putting it into the space that's important to you, that means other people don't have to do that work too. They can focus on the spaces that are really important to them. And that way we all kind of, you know, when the concept of like sisterhood, where when one person achieves or thrives or, you know, does really great, it's like it then rises all of us together. It's exactly the same concept with inclusion. You should learn when is and isn't the right times for you to speak. So in spaces where you are talking about marginalized people, if there are marginalized people there, it's the time for you to step back and allow those people to speak. If there is no marginalized people present, it's not the time for you to speak on their behalf, but you can certainly advocate for them having a voice in that space. And also, because you are business owners, you already have such great influence. You have followers, you have audience, you have clients. So there are people who are looking to you as a leader in the community. So you have influence, and you can use your platforms and your influence to elevate and amplify those voices and those stories. So you don't even need to say them yourself. You can find them, you can hear them, and if they resonate with you, you can share them on your platforms, or you can invite those people to come and share their stories themselves. So getting it wrong. This is something that a lot of people struggle with, and it is something we're all going to do. We're all going to get it wrong. I'm not going to stand here and say, I do inclusion and diversity perfectly, and I don't make mistakes or anything like that. Absolutely not. I make mistakes all the time. And even just earlier, talking about the use of woman with an X rather than just using woman, I have used that. But it's about the learning process, and being okay with getting it wrong. But knowing that you have done it from a complete space of love and respect, honesty and integrity. But when you do realize that you have maybe done it in the way that's not best, or you have actually just got it plain and simple wrong, being humble enough to admit that you had made that mistake and correcting it with all the people that you have shared that with, and then taking the steps to learn better about it. And that's all we can do. I mean, if you get things wrong in this space, something I said on a free workshop I did at the start of last year was that if you are a white person in Australia, you are literally the safest person. And if you're a white person in general, if you have fair skin, I have fair skin, you are the safest person on the planet, because that's the privilege, that's the white privilege that we have. So even if we do say things that are wrong, the most that happens is a lot less than what people of color would experience in those same situations. So, you know, really understanding our privilege, and that the most we might experience is some people might be upset with us, or you know, someone might unfriend us or be kicked out of a group or something. In the grand scheme of things, that's really not terrible at all. I mean, I'm thinking about now, you know, my ancestors and people who have dealt with different types of suffrages, and people who have dealt with or wanted equality and have been protesting for equality and campaigning for equality and, you know, racial equality. Those people paid greatly. A lot of people paid with their lives because of those things. And I don't think that having an uncomfortable conversation is really any comparison to that at all. And it really dives down to, what do you want in the world? And you will find that because this is such a silent thing, not many people talk about it. When you do start to talk about it, you will find that so many people are really with you, and they're all like, yes, I'm so glad you're talking about this. I was afraid to speak up about this stuff, but I'm so glad you are. And you'll just come across more and more people that are doing that and agree with you and want the same things that we want. We want inclusion. We want to have an equal world, and we want to show up in that way and be part of that change. Okay, let's move on. Oh my gosh, this is going so much longer than I thought. I'm not going to apologize because this is great stuff. Thank you for hanging around if you do have the time. And not knowing where to get the right information or who to listen to. Well, for starters, you can come to me. I'm one of those people who is saying, I've put my hand up and said, I'm a person who openly and publicly will be a person you can come to for information, and where you can listen to stuff. The thing is, you can also look for other marginalized people who speak in the inclusion space as well, and diversity space. You can follow them. The important thing is that that person resonates with you. So if you're listening to me now and you're like, not quite my type of person, not quite the feel for what aligns with me, that's totally okay. I'm not for everyone, but I encourage you to find someone in the inclusion and diversity space, and I encourage them to be someone from a marginalized group, because no amount of learning from universities or degrees or anything like that will give you the same understanding, deep understanding, as someone who's actually lived that experience in the society. So that's totally fine if you don't want to work with me, if you don't want to continue doing this. I totally understand. I don't vibe with everyone either. So find that person that really you go, yes, they're the person for me. Totally love them, totally vibe with them. Beautiful. And get like a really different range of views as well. Now, fear of confrontation. So the way I talk about allyship, I talk about gentle allyship. And a lot of time there is a lot of fear because you think automatically of things like protests and rallies, and you think about, you know, angry people, being loud and a lot of us are just not like that and not comfortable in those spaces. And often a lot of things that are said in those protests don't align with us. I know for sure a lot of the protests that I have been to, the things that have been said are things I don't agree with, and often they're completely off topic from what I'm even there for. So I talk a lot about it being, it's not like this thing where we need to have this conversation and we need to convince this person to believe in what we believe in. That is complete self-righteousness. I don't encourage that at all, because who's to say who is right in anything? We are not here to convince anyone of anything. I'm not here to convince you of anything. I'm here to share my knowledge and my experiences and my narrative and my perspective. And if whatever you take from that, you take from that. But I'm certainly not pushing any of this stuff onto you, and I encourage you not to push your stuff onto other people. It's more about having and starting a conversation, a respectful, gentle conversation where two people are coming together and able to really listen, be present, and receive each other's perspectives and ideas about the topic. When you start getting loud and angry, that's when, psychologically speaking, your frontal lobe, your space for reasoning, completely shuts down, and you activate your amygdala. And your amygdala is that thing that's the fight, flight, freeze, and appease thing. And you do not absorb anything. It's literally just survival mode. And then it comes down to, back and forth without making a difference at all. So what I encourage is just really gentle, respectful. Let's have a little bit of a conversation about this. Being okay to completely disagree with each other and then going away from each other. That is absolutely fine. But what happens is when we walk away from each other, we think about those conversations and we process some of the stuff. And then what might happen is that that person who you had that gentle conversation with comes back and says, you know that thing we were talking about the other day? I've had a bit of a think about this, and this is what I think about it. And then you can engage in another gentle conversation. This, in Australia, this has been almost 250 years worth of getting to this point. And a lot longer in a lot of other places. So a single conversation is not going to solve problems, and a single conversation is not going to remove people's biases. It's not going to remove the social conditioning, not going to remove the personal experiences that they have come, which have concreted those beliefs. So by just talking gently about it, bit by bit, if we continue this conversation in a loving, respectful way with everyone, people are going to feel like they can speak in this space. They feel safe to speak in this space. And that's certainly something you can do in your businesses, is start to talk gently about bringing up these, these things. Okay, so, okay, how are you feeling? Let me see your comments. Jody says, I made that mistake this week, noticed it quickly though, learning. Beautiful. And that's all we can do. That is literally the very best thing that we can do, is just pick it up, have that awareness, pick it up, and then learn and do whatever action is required to try and make that situation better. Okay, Darlene says, I learned a lot about Aboriginal people when I was doing an arts degree. It was so interesting. Yep, absolutely. And the thing too, Darlene, is in institutions like universities and things like that, the information there is very limited about Aboriginal people or marginalised people, because the value is so deeply on the written word in books or on internet and things like that. But there is a power play with books, and it's whoever is the dominant culture decides what books are published and what aren't. Things like news media, you have people like Rupert Murdoch, who owns most of our news media, and so therefore has the control of what is said and what angles they come out at. So it's always good to keep in your mind when you are learning about something is, where does this actually come from? Is this from an original source, or is this from people observing other people and then putting their own perspectives and points of view on that particular thing? And Marty says, as a sole parent, autistic, I experience a non-inclusive society. However, there is a difference between this and what our Indigenous people experience. This is a hard topic to unpack and understand for us all on all sides. Absolutely. And the thing too, Marty, is that you will be experiencing a lot of similarities to what Aboriginal people experience as well, because it is a process and system of oppression of people who are different in some way. So certainly they will run parallel to each other. And the thing is, if you are speaking up about some form of oppression in our societies, that's exactly the same analogy as all the boats rising, is that it impacts and has a flow-on effect to everything, because we're so taught that these things are siloed. So there's this cause, so there's this race thing about race and equality, there's this thing about the treatment of autistic people, or how society welcomes them or doesn't welcome them, or things like that. But they're all interrelated. They're not siloed in any way. They're not islands. And if you are supporting the equality of one group of marginalised people, you are supporting the equality of all marginalised people. Jody says, I get that space a lot in relation to race issues. It makes me really poor at influencing. I'm focusing on slowing down so I can stay in my values and have those more gentle and more effective conversations. Yeah, absolutely. And because a lot of this is we really feel very strongly about and passionate about, it can kind of hurt sometimes, or it can be really frustrating that people can't understand our perspectives. But in saying that, the reverse is also true, that when we are having those conversations, we are not taking into consideration all the experiences they've had, their upbringings, their identity, how it impacts them. We're not also taking everything from their perspective into consideration as well. So it really does need to be a two-way thing where there is mindfulness, what is that called? And self-fullness. So it's when you're talking about what's important to you and wanting what you need for you and your soul and your business, but you're also very super aware of that other person and how maybe they are interacting with that and what they're requiring from that space as well. Okay, Darlene's answering to my comment. Thankfully, the teacher was Indigenous and very open. Beautiful, lovely, lovely. I couldn't speak about my depression and anxiety when I was working as a nurse because of the way they were treated, and I would have been earmarked as a problem. Yeah, absolutely. It's so interesting that you can be in a health and wellness space or a medical wellness space and feel that you aren't safe there to talk about your depression and anxiety, where wouldn't that be wonderful if that is the safest space that you could possibly do that, and that you could have complete support from your colleagues and your peers there. Depression and anxiety is certainly something in our society that is it is getting better, much better, but it's not at that point where it is inclusive of those things. And I have talked about mental illness, and since that point I have been contacted and informed that a better use of the word is mental health challenges, because you're not any lesser than because you're experiencing these things, you are absolutely equal. You're just experiencing a different way of living. And so many other people. I will absolutely put my hand up. Anxiety has been a big part in my past. And only last month, I had an anxiety attack after about a year. So it was not pleasant. For me, it's quite painful. But the more we talk about it, the more it becomes okay, the more it becomes safe. And it's absolutely okay to experience these things in our lives. We're all people and we all go through different things in our mental spaces. I mean, for instance, every single person here in this workshop is feeling some kind of mental block, restriction, fear over talking about inclusion and diversity. Otherwise you wouldn't be here, you wouldn't be trying to seek my help in this space. So it is no different to that. Okay. Okay, let's move on. Okay, let's move to culture in business. Okay, so what is culture? Culture is pretty much everything that you experience in your life. So it's the clothes you wear, it's the food you eat, it's how you eat, it's the celebrations you celebrate, it's the entertainment that you engage in, it's the body language and the eye contact, it is how you present yourself and express yourself, it is so much stuff, so it's everything. And when you can really have a look around in your world and go, oh, that's culture, that's culture. Like I can look in, I'm sitting in my dining room at the moment and I can say, okay, well, our culture has a dining room table and we sit at a table to eat our meals. That's culture. I can look up on the wall there and I have got a dot painting that my friend had painted for me. That is my culture. I can look outside my window and go, okay, I've got a fenced yard. I live in a block that I have purchased and I live in a house. That's culture. So when we can really start understanding every part of our culture and what makes it up, we can then start to understand that not every person lives the same way we do and experiences life the same way we do and has the same systems or rituals the way we do. It just seems like that's what everyone does because that's the dominant culture. Okay, so the four main pillars of culture are symbols, language, social values, and norms. So I'll go through a little bit of them and then you can start thinking about your business and how they actually show up in your business. So we'll talk about symbols. So this can be anything that is some kind of symbol that has an association to it. And the association to the symbol doesn't necessarily make sense to anyone who isn't part of that culture. So things like flags, emojis, traffic lights, also things like dollar signs. Are there any things in particular that you use as a symbol? So for me, I use a butterfly a lot in my marketing. Now, for a lot of people, especially in the spiritual world, a butterfly could mean something like transformation. There are other different meanings in that, but I like it for that reason. But one of the main reasons I use it is because my dreaming, my Aboriginal dreaming, is bindi bindi dreaming, which is butterfly dreaming here. So that's a way I can show a bit of my culture from both angles, and they both make sense to me in my business, but from each culture's perspective, they actually mean different things. It's the same symbol, they mean different things. So just having a look at some of the symbols that you use and then starting to ask yourself, what does this mean to groups outside of the community I identify with? Then there's language, and I've already talked a little bit about use of language. So this can be verbal and non-verbal language, body language, phrases, idioms, slang, things like eye contact, sounds, and alphabet. So are there any, I just want you to think about some of the words that you use in your business a lot. I want you to think about things like, how do you greet your people? And I have found that a lot of businesses can be quite exclusive with the way they greet. Like in the first 2 words that they speak, they can cut out a lot of people without even knowing. So for me, it's really important to be all inclusive just in those spaces. So a great thing you can use is just hello everyone, hello all, hi friends, hi guests. And it's a way of not talking about or excluding people in the way they identify. A common term that is used way too much, even for my liking, is, and I'm sure a lot of you probably use it, and I have in the past used it a lot, is things like, hi guys. I get called a guy at least 10 times a day, honestly, and I'm not a guy. And I know this was made common to mean everyone, but you still have to look at the root of the word and then understand that that word still is linked with a dominant or ideal human. And if we're wanting to be all inclusive, not everyone identifies as a guy. So just having a little bit think about those kinds of things. And your idioms. A lot of the idioms that you use are linked with really terrible events, are linked with a lot of marginalization stuff. And idioms are when you're using a phrase that is a common phrase that actually means something else. So if you are tempted to use a phrase, I would encourage you just to say what you mean and not use the idiom until you are certain that that is what you're meaning. And that's the right thing based on that phrase. The next thing is your values. So values often are culturally defined. They're standards for good and bad, and they can change depending on the culture and the community and the way it changes as well. But it's really good to define what are cultural values in your society and what are your personal core values. So they may even be the same thing, but you will see sometimes that in society, a societal value doesn't align with that same value, but from your own perspective. For instance, fairness is one of my values, and fairness is a value held highly in Australia. Yet, what's seen as fair in the eyes of the government or in the eyes of most of the population is certainly not something I would regard as fair, especially to marginalised people. So the value's the same, but how it is defined and how it's played out in reality is very, very different. And then you have things like norms. So there are 2 types of norms. There are folkways and mores. So folkways are your appropriate casual rules of behaviour. So at the moment, it is getting better and people are pulling up others for this, but casual racism is a socially accepted behaviour in our society. It is okay to make jokes or make remarks based on people's races to put them down or mock them in some way, and that is seen as socially okay. Now, like I said, that is going down, it's getting better, but we're not there yet. And mores are those rules that kind of dictate what is wrong and right in society, and they are not always the same in all cultures, and it's really good to understand that all ethical wrong and rights are not equal among everyone. Okay, so how you feel with that? Let me just check if there's any comments. Okay, Erin has said, can you please give an idiom example? Sure. So one idiom that I heard recently, which is used commonly in business, is when we're talking about low-priced products or services, and people say, well, they're like the low-hanging fruit. So low-hanging fruit is linked to lynchings of Black African Americans, and so that, even though that low-hanging fruit is a way of saying, oh, that's an easy way to get people to come in, they'll purchase that really quickly and easily, it is actually an idiom which came from lynchings, which is a very, very terrible, horrific thing. And people from that community know where that originates from, and so when you say low-hanging fruit, they directly link it to those terrible past events that have happened. Another thing is, another American example is the peanut gallery, and it's an idiom that we use here a lot in Australia. It's like a favourite term, especially if you're talking about the government. But that is when that originated from the time of segregation in theatres, where the people of colour were placed at the back of the cinemas or the theatres, and they were separated from the white folk. And that group of people were then called the peanut gallery, because it was a way of mocking their intellectual ability. So there are a couple of examples there. There are lots. I think I may have shared some of them on my business page. Okay. Darlene says, OMG, yes, in the surf club, it's mainly the older people that do this. I walk away from these people as it feels so wrong. Racism is still well used, unfortunately. It certainly is. Absolutely, 100% agree with that. But we got to lead by example. We got to set the roles. We got to, let people know when it's not okay. And it doesn't have to be in a really direct, harsh way. You could simply say, look, I don't agree with that, or I don't appreciate that kind of talk. And often that is a good enough deterrent that they won't do it around you at least again. Because it's uncomfortable in social situations to be told that people don't like what you're doing. We all want to be accepted, and we all want to be liked. Okay, so that is pretty much it for today. I do have some what I call inclusion work for you today. We have gone well over. Thank you so much for hanging around. Now, your inclusion work is a bit of journaling, if you like journaling, or whatever contemplation type stuff you like to do, the way you like to do it, you can do that. And there are 6 prompts there, but what I want you to do with those prompts is to read them and then answer them as this is what is right now in this current, and this is what is as led up to this point. And then I want you to stop for a moment, do a little bit of meditation, a little bit of deep breathing, connect in with, with your heart, really get into alignment, and then listen if there are any kinds of whisperings of how you can be more inclusive in your business or in your world, and write those things down. And once you have done those, I want you to come back into the Inclusion and Diversity Creators community, this group here, and there will be already a post that has posted to say this is day 1 thread, and just put down if you've had any aha moments, what feelings or emotions came up for you, what was your takeaway for today, or if there's been any new ideas, insights or thoughts that have come through because of your inner listening. And this is perfect timing because my family has just arrived home, but I will be completely upfront and honest with you. At the end of this, I will be opening up my 4-week coaching program. It's inclusion and it's an inclusion coaching program. It is a group program, and what it will consist of is 4 modules and then a weekly live call with me. And I will just quickly go through the curriculum with you. You'll hear my family come in a second. Hi, I'm still on. So module 1 is the inclusive calling. Module 2 is status quo shake-up. Module 3 is unconscious players and privilege. And module 4 is inclusion action mapping. So this is exclusively for business owners, and I will help you to really look at your business as a unique business and you as an individual, and coming up with how you can best include allyship or inclusion in your business. I can't do it in settings like this, but the space that I will have for my 4-week group coaching program, I will be able to do that, and you'll have access to a private Facebook group where we can you have access to me to answer lots of different questions. You have access to jumping on live with me and asking your questions in our weekly calls, and we will have a whole bunch of fun looking at new ways to do your business and not the way business has always been done. So thank you so much for hanging around. I have loved spending this time with you. If you have any questions, pop them in the comments. Please do the inclusion work. That's where the magic happens. That's where the transformations for you and your business happen. I will send that inclusion work out to you in an email very soon. And until tomorrow, have a fantastic day. Much love to you all.